Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm, where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflects the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways that help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of the community, for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. There was a stretch a while back when a vendor my team had retained made a rather serious mistake on a matter with a hard deadline and very strict requirements about the scope of the project. Now, I haven't actually touched the file myself, but I led the service line, which, as any good leader knows, really meant it was all my responsibility. So I sat on the porch that night, convinced I was going to lose my job, not because I had personally made it her, but rather because it was my job to run the team. It's my job to run the vendor we used and our clients. Losing the client, putting our company at risk, and me are shimbled through my mind, including the fact that the mistake might cost me my job. The stress of the incident created a bursted blood vessel or a hemorrhage in my right eye. My entire right eye went bloodshot and it stayed that way for days. And this is not a metaphor for what stress did to me. It actually happened. So the next morning, I called the client before they called me. And I called my senior leadership team before they came looking. Now, both conversations were really uncomfortable in ways that I still remember very, very specifically. Recalling the story aloud right now actually produces a memorable stress. And I told myself the same thing I want you to hear right now. Now, I know I didn't do anything particularly wrong because I didn't touch the project. But again, it really doesn't matter. Why? Because as a leader, I owned it. I owned the entire thing because I was running the service line. And I was shielding my team from any blame along the way because that's the job of a leader. The client was rightfully upset with us, but the team stayed intact and I didn't lose my job. Everyone above me had my back throughout the entire process, but none of that happened because the mistake disappeared. It happened because I chose accountability before anyone made. Now, let's take another example. Much, much simpler, less devastating example. My neighbor's tree service cut down trees near my property line and found all the stumps. Now, the project manager rang my doorbell and asked me to move my car out of the driveway so any falling tree trunks or branches wouldn't hit it. I liked that. I was actually impressed. Someone was thinking ahead. But then, without my knowledge, and obviously without my consent, the crew rolled their equipment across my entire driveway to haul away all of the debris. So I came outside to find tire marks and mud and bark debris all over the driveway. So I confronted the project manager and he didn't own it right away. He didn't take accountability. So finally he conceded, and while he tried to fix the issue with a hose and dish soap, I had to point out that the marks were still there. So finally, he came back the next day with a professional power washer, apologized without qualification, and left his business card at my door with some handwriting on the back, again apologizing. I was frustrated that he didn't own it the first time, and it would have made the substantive resolution much easier and, frankly, quite faster. So while I was satisfied with how he owned it the second time, notice the gap between those two moments. The gap, the space between getting caught and choosing to own it, is where most of what I want to talk about today lives. It's really interesting. I did some research and it turns out that roughly 10% of Fortune 500 companies have some version of choose accountability written into their core values. It does at my day job. Other companies like Amazon call it ownership. Leaders act on behalf of the whole company and never say, "That's not my job." Boeing, they stated quite plainly, be accountable. CVS pairs it with integrity, collaboration, and caring. McKesson lists it among its shared principles. Companies do not build a value around a behavior unless that behavior is hard to sustain without the deliberate reinforcement. So that Amazon principle acting on behalf of the whole company and never saying that's not my job, that actually reminds me of a friend of mine who runs a technology company who keeps a full commercial shoe shine chair in the middle of his office. Now, I've told this story before in another episode here on the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. A new hire sales rep once told him that an errand was beneath his role. So my friend, the owner, didn't argue the point. He just looked at his scuffed shoes and asked how he could sell without looking presentable, and then got down on his knees and polished the new hire's shoes. He reminded him that ownership isn't a line item on a job description. It's whether you'll do the thing nobody assigned it to you because it needed the doing. So accountability gets written down because it is very, very fragile. It has to be. Because the thing of holding it back isn't laziness or bad character. It's literally human biology. And this is where it gets really interesting. When a person becomes aware that they made a mistake, the sympathetic nervous system is activated because the brain reads the situation as a threat to status, to safety, or identity. Confrontation triggers a surge of cortisol and adrenaline. The surge impairs the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for clear reasoning, and pushes the brain towards that infamous fight or flight response. Blame shifting, arguing, and withdrawal. Now, at the same time, admitting a damaging mistake causes a sharp drop in dopamine. The nervous system registers that drop as a genuine social pain. Defensiveness and denial aren't moral failures in that moment. They're the brain's fastest available protection against discomfort, arriving before objective reflection can actually catch up. Now, let's take a simple example. You take a fender bender in a parking lot as a very simple idea of understanding this whole entire biology. So a driver backs out without checking their mirror and clips another car. So watch what happens. For a second, they consider pulling away. But then the driver notices a security camera in the parking lot. Or maybe they notice a witness. And that shifts something within them. What it is not is a mental awakening. It's a threat calculation changing in real time. Now watch it happen again in a restaurant, right? So now you have a line cook plates the wrong order during dinner rush. The instinct in that first half second is to send it out anyway and hope that nobody notices. That instinct isn't laziness, but it's the same cortisol spike telling the cook that admitting the errors costs more socially than letting it slide. How about another example? Much more serious. A lawyer citing a hallucinated case law generated by generative AI faces the exact same issue. Something similar, a car salesperson who quotes the wrong price on a contract. The mistake itself rarely determines what happens next. It is the response to getting caught that does. Now, the opposite patterns hold when the culture around a person changes. So, in teams that normalize radical candor and psychological safety, the brain stops classifying an error as an existential threat. The sympathetic nervous system stays calm. Cortisol and adrenaline stay flat, which means the prefrontal cortex stays fully online for actual problem solving instead of panic. So when a mistake is met with support rather than punishment, something different happens at the neurochemical level. Dopamine gets stimulated through collaborative problem solving. Oxytocin gets released through the experience of mutual trust. So accountability stops being a threat the brain has to survive. It becomes a rewarding social behavior the brain starts to seek. It's wildly fascinating. Now, one of the most listened to episodes of the Gold Standard Leadership Lab that I've done thus far was the one where I talked about something that sounds almost too simple to belong in a leadership conversation. And what it was called, or what I said rather, was just be a damn decent human. Do what you say and say what you do. It's really that simple. And I told a story then about defending my team against an opposing counsel who treated my team like a second-class professionals. about calling out senior leaders who intimidated people below them and hating even the phrase below them because rank was never the point. About choosing accountability for myself first on the theory that I couldn't ask anyone else to choose it if I had not. The neuroscience I just walked you through explains why decency is so hard to sustain under pressure. It's biology. Cortisol doesn't care about your values. And adrenaline doesn't check your mission statement before it hijacks your prefrontal cortex. The North Star only holds if you practice returning to it before the moment that tests it arrives. That was what my porch was. Not a moment where I discovered a new value. Accountability doesn't just belong to one pillar of the golden leadership cycle because it moves through all three. Resilience shows up first because owning a mistake requires tolerating the discomfort I described a moment ago. The cortisol spike, the dopamine drop, without collapsing into defensiveness. That's a resilience skill before it's anything else. Now, second, empowerment shows up next because a leader who publicly owns mistakes gives everyone under them permission to do the same. My porch moment didn't just resolve a one client relationship because by leading by example, it set a standard for what the team could expect from me the next time something went wrong. Now, finally, reinventing, that shows up last. Why? Because it's the piece that people miss. Every account of a serious mistake is also the raw material for becoming a different kind of leader than you were the day before it happened. I didn't walk off that porch the same person I was when I sat down on it. I believe that there are 3 habits that immediately shift a team's neurochemistry. The first is leading with vulnerability. When a leader owns a mistake first, out loud, before anyone else has to point it out, the perceived threat level in the room drops. Cortisol stays low because the room just watched proof. Owning a mistake doesn't end badly. This doesn't require a speech. It can be one sentence in a team meeting. Here's what I got wrong this week, and here's what I'm doing about it. That's it. No, the next one is to reward the signal and not the silence. Thank someone the moment they surface a problem, before you diagnose it, before you fix it. That immediate acknowledgement provides dopamine reinforcement for transparency rather than punishment for disclosure. If the first thing that an employee hears after raising a problem is a question about why it happened, well, you've just taught them to wait longer next time before telling you anything at all. Then finally, number 3, it's important to separate the person from the problem. Frame errors around a process gap or a missing variable rather than a character flaw. That framing removes the threat of social shame and protects the trust that lets someone come to you next time instead of hiding from you. A missed deadline caused by an unclear handoff is a process conversation. The same missed deadline framed as someone being unreliable, that's a character conversation. And character conversations are the ones people stop having with you honestly. Think about the last time someone on your team came to you with a mistake before you found it yourself. If you can't remember the last time that happened, that's not a reflection on your team. That's data about what your team's nervous system has learned to expect from you. Then ask yourself a second question. The last time you made a mistake at work, how long passed between the moment you knew and the moment that you told someone? That gap is the same gap I described on my driveway. It's worth timing, honestly. That night on my porch, it's in the book that I'm writing in more vivid detail than I've ever told publicly because it's the moment that taught me what real accountability costs and what it protects. The book is being written. I can't wait to share it with all of you. And remember, leadership isn't about perfection. It is about progress. So take this lesson, put it into practice, and continue living the gold standard in your own life and at work. See you all next time.